Hey, everybody. How's it going? Welcome. I'm Lee Camp, the most censored comedian in America. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here. Trump admitted, in the way only he can do, admitted the goal of the U.S. to steal another country's oil. I'm going to show you that clip in a second. You know, that's part of the reason that the ruling elite, the ruling class, have this rift. Some of them support him, but many of them do not. And one of the biggest reasons is because he says the truth, which you would think is a positive, right? You and me, we're like, yeah, he says the truth. That's great, right? But half the time he says the truth about the crimes of the US and he admits that those are his goals. So, if you're a serial killer and you go, hey, I'm a serial killer, you're like, well, that truth is kind of refreshing. I don't know that I am still, I don't know, I'm a fan of serial killing per se, if just because the guy admits to it. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I got that story. I got stories on the biggest settlement in American history paid by the police and what that means. A huge settlement by one of the largest big banks in terms of what went on with their connections to Jeffrey Epstein, hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm going to get to that story. Got a whole bunch for you. Thanks for being here. Please click subscribe. When you click subscribe, click the bell, hit share, leave a comment. Even if you got nothing to say, just type something there because it helps me fight the algorithms, the ever dastardly algorithms. All right, let's get to it though. I'm going to show you this clip. So this is Trump just the other day. And doing his speeches, which are really kind of like a roast comedian. It's like roast comic shows is what he does. It's generally not like, if you were to compare him to other comedians, like a bad roast comedy show. But if you compare him to other politicians, it's like a brilliant roast comedy show. So it depends on where you put him. All right, but this is just a very short clip, but it says so much. It reveals so much.
How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door. But now we're buying oil from Venezuela, so we're making a dictator very rich. Can you believe this? Nobody can believe it. You know where the oil, their oil is garbage. It's horrible. The worst you can get, tar. It's like tar. And to refine it, you need special plants. And these people, how about we're buying oil?
Anyway, I realize that's only 30 seconds, but there's a lot to break down there. First of all, this is an admission by a former U.S. president that the goal of the U.S. government in that time, and maybe in many, many times, but in that time specifically, was to steal oil, was to collapse a country and steal their oil. The country of Venezuela, which actually, by sheer volume, even though much of it is not accessible at the moment, has either the most or one of the top two oil reserves. I think it's maybe the number one oil reserves in the world. But much of it they can't get to and they can't refine because the U.S. has an economic war on them that makes it nearly impossible, etc. You guys know that part. But Trump is admitting that if he were president, the goal while he was still in office, and if he had won re-election, would have been to continue to collapse Venezuela and steal their oil. Now, of course, if you are a sane human being, if you're an adult with actual empathy or even a modicum of understanding of fellow humans, then you would go, I don't support that. I don't like to see people suffer, to see their country destroyed so that I can steal their oil. Now, obviously, he's speaking to a large audience that I guess doesn't have those things, doesn't have empathy for other humans, or doesn't understand what he's saying. Maybe many of them don't understand what he's saying, but saying you're going to destroy a nation to steal their oil is disgusting. It's sociopathic. It's the ugliest form that humanity can take. But what he's saying is an admission about the way the U.S. government works. That is absolutely true. Much of what Trump says is bullshit. Sometimes he speaks the truth. Sometimes it's bullshit. For example, him saying right here that Venezuela was about to collapse and we were about to take over. That's all bullshit. However, the part about the U.S. goal to steal Venezuelan oil is absolutely true. I mean, the goal is also to create a failed state out of a country that has a far more progressed socialism than many countries around the world, and certainly more than the U.S. has. Don't forget, we have some levels of socialism in the sense of Social Security and, I don't know, roads and police and military in those regards. But we want to crush Venezuela and Cuba and so many other countries because they have a far more progressed form of socialism. And we want to destroy them because it sets a bad example, right? If you say, hey, there's a country out there where everybody has healthcare and everybody has food and everybody has housing guaranteed. And in Cuba, everybody has employment guaranteed and they have education guaranteed. And Cuba has a literacy rate of 99%. It's the highest in the world. And you say that to people and they go, well, that sounds pretty good. And so the U.S., in order to maintain our hegemony, in order to maintain our empire, in order to sit up on the throne and look down on everyone else, we have to destroy and crush those countries that set those bad examples, right, by having healthcare and so many other things. But we also like stealing resources. That is certainly on our agenda as well. And Trump, unlike all of our other presidents, admits these things. He says these things to audiences. He says, I want to steal the oil. He has said in interviews when he was president that the mistake that was made with Iraq was not stealing their oil. He has said in Syria, we've got the oil. Don't worry about Syria. We've got their oil, because with the 10% of Syria that the U.S. continues to hold under our military thumb is most of their oil fields, or a lot of their oil fields. And so Trump says, the military is there to secure the oil. He said those things when he was in office. So all of these revelations, all of these facts are terrifying for the ruling elite to hear a president say these things. Now, as I said earlier, that doesn't mean that you should celebrate Trump and love him, because he's admitting to things that only sociopaths would celebrate. But it does give us a glimpse into how our ruling elite think, how they work behind closed doors. He's either not smart enough, or he's so full of himself. I mean, he's smart in various regards, and others he's breathtakingly dumb, but in certain ways he is very smart. And whether it has to do with he's not intelligent enough to know how to hide these things, I don't think that's actually it. I think it's that his ego is so large that he doesn't care to hide these things. He knows that, maybe he'll get applause if he says to everybody, hey, in Venezuela, Joe Biden's buying oil from Venezuela. I would have stolen it. And everybody at his rallies goes, yay, steal oil from poor people. Awesome. That's cool. Yeah, daddy-o. I mean, it is like on that level, it is amazing that you could have like thousands of people in an arena and just say, those people where 100,000, those are some of the latest reports, 100,000 have died in Venezuela from our economic war on them. A lot of that has to do with medications that we don't allow in, et cetera. And who is it that dies quickest from not having medication or not having enough food? It's going to be the poorest, the weakest, the elderly, babies. And so when we celebrate what we're doing to Venezuela, we're celebrating the death of babies. That's what we're doing, is going, yay, we killed some babies. So here is Trump on stage. Could you imagine a room full of like 10,000 people and you're like, those sick babies? I would have stolen oil from them and from the elderly people that are struggling because they have like asthma or something. I would have stolen oil money from them, and having like 10,000 people go, yay! It's totally bizarre. It's bizarre. But that's where we now sit. So I wanted to show this clip, not just to say, wow, isn't Trump a psychopath as our other leaders, but I wanted to show it in that he reveals much of the truth about our hegemony, about our ruling empire. He comes out and says it. He says the quiet part loud, and it is terrible for the ruling elite to have that up at the podium representing America. And so that is what's behind all of the efforts to get to stop him from running again, because they don't want a president running around saying, "Hey, we're trying to steal that guy's oil and we want to crush that society and we want to," like, that is, they want the lies up there. They want the facade of human rights, of caring about countries. We went in there to bring democracy. Like, Trump's not saying that, right? If he were a different politician right there, he would have said, if I were in power, we would have brought democracy to Venezuela. But he doesn't know how to do that or care to do it. And then, of course, that 30 seconds is also filled with other lies, like the idea that Maduro is a dictator. Maduro is actually elected with far more of a legitimate election process than the United States has. I'll tell you that much. Whatever issues they have with their voting system, it's nothing compared to the US. We vote on black box machines where you just fucking push on a screen and then you just cross your fingers and say, I bet that counted for something. And can anyone ever recount or prove that you voted for the thing? No, nobody. Who? Oh, the guy. Oh, yeah, we could certainly count your vote or recount your vote and prove it. And we'll do it right now. I push this button and computer says, yep, good. Oh, great. How did the computer come to that analysis? Well, they won't let us see the code. They won't let you see the code. They won't let you see the programming that actually tells the computer what to do or how to count votes. And, there's been all these revelations about fractional vote counting where we have seen some of the code and it's shown that a vote counts as 1.0. Well, why is there a fraction? Why should they ever even be involved in a fraction of a vote? And then if you look at the way that the votes change over the course of an evening as everyone votes, they seem to, statistically, this is only in certain areas, this is not everywhere. Statistically, they seem to slowly get further and further apart, as if some votes are counting as 0.9 and others are counting as 1.1. Wouldn't that be interesting? But no, we can't see any of that. But no, Maduro, he's the real dictator, because that's the one. But so Trump is this beautiful mixture of truth and lies, but the truth he tells is not good for the ruling elite.
How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door.
We would have gotten all that oil. Oh, it would have been so nice. Oh, what beautiful oil. But let's remember that not only was Venezuela not about to collapse, but under Trump, there actually was an attempted coup. I mean, maybe there were multiple that we didn't hear about, but there was a attempted coup of Venezuela that many have termed the Bay of Piglets, because it was like a Bay of Pigs, except under Trump. Oops, sorry. They sent a group, mainly not Americans, but there were some Americans involved, a group of people, a group of mercenaries in rafts to go and invade Venezuela and kill Maduro. And this group of, I think it was roughly 60 guys, didn't even make it to the mainland. Most of them, they were caught by they were seen and caught by fishermen outside of Venezuela, who basically, I think, called the military and the police or whatever and said, there's like 60 scrubby guys in a raft who have torn shirts on. They're coming your way. But anyway, this was under Trump, and it's tough to know how much his administration knew was happening. Clearly, there were Americans connected to connected to might be a strong term, but Americans who had been in contact with various Trump officials who were behind this, who actually had a signed deal from Juan Guaido to do this, to try and coup Venezuela, but they didn't even get past the fucking fishermen. Oh God, those are some badass fishermen, though. Mercenaries, we got it. We got you. We'll take those on. We'll hit them smack them over the head with a trout. Okay, I want to move on to the next story. The largest settlement The large oh, and I guess I'll just throw this in here. Obviously all the mainstream media is covering is the Trump indictments that have just come down, like 37 indictments or whatever against Trump. And there's multiple things going on in that. There's some nuance that most people don't want to talk about. So you have the left wing, not left, sorry. Even I fall into the fucking euphemisms of the mainstream. The liberal side, they are not left wing. The liberal side of things, the CNNs and the MSNBCs saying, holy God, Trump's the most corrupt person you've ever seen. Oh, dear Lord, is he corrupt? Praise the Lord, it's too corrupt. And they say, oh, he's gonna be locked away for 100 years. Then you go to Fox News or Newsmax or so many others, and many of the online commentators as well, and they go, he's exactly the same as Hillary Clinton. They're indicting Trump, and they're not indicting Biden or Pence, who were also shown to have papers, classified documents at their residence. So here's the nuance that real quick that you will not get. I don't even usually cover the mainstream stories, but that you'll not get from either of these two sides. One is, yes, Pence and Biden also had classified documents in their possession that were found in their possession. However, there is a difference in that Trump gave some of the classified documents back to the archives, but then when he was asked if he had more or to give all of his classified documents back, he then went forward, and they apparently have evidence of this, to cover some up, to show it to people, which is not the case in the Biden and the Pence documents, it seems. However, so that's one caveat that actually that score 1 point for the liberals. All right, what Trump did is a different level. It seems It seems to have knowingly hidden these documents. Okay, so score 1 for the liberals on that. However, the part they won't give you is that, yeah, it's not even on the same playing field as the corruption of Hillary Clinton and the Clinton machine and everything else. The connections to Epstein are the minimum. I mean, Trump also connected to Epstein, but and it's like that corruption is massive in so many different ways. But Trump also has just crazy amounts of corruption that are way bigger than the fucking boxes he had in his shower. So both sides have that garbage, and Biden and everything else. But the reason they have to get him on this one thing is because they don't want to indict him on forms of corruption that also hit Hillary Clinton and Biden and everyone else. So they had to find a bit of his corruption that they could say, well, Biden didn't do exactly that. But even this one, they're having trouble explaining that because they both had classified documents, but what Trump did is different. So anyway, the reason they're going after this bit of corruption is because they don't want to indict him on things that are also would be indictable for the Clintons and for the Bidens and everything else. And the reason for that is, as I said earlier, that Trump was a bad CEO for America Inc. He was a bad CEO for the inverted totalitarian system we have, in which corporate America rules over our government, which means since the U.S. is the most powerful government for the time being in the world, it means that corporate America runs the world, has hegemony over the world. And Trump is hurting that. He hurt that as president. He made it more difficult to have that hegemony. And so many of the ruling elite want to get him out, and they're doing it they're trying to do it via these indictments. I hope that all made sense. I hope that, and that seems to be the nuanced view of what is happening here that you do not get from either of what we call our two sides, which are not really two sides, but you don't get it from the liberal, you don't get it from the right wing, the Republican side. You get garbage from both. And so, all right. But moving on, I want to get to this is the largest settlement. This is the largest amount of money a police department has ever had to pay for harm they've done to citizens, to civilians. And that's a big deal, but perhaps bigger than just that story is the goal. the long-term goal of this. So this is from USA Today. Largest settlement in U.S. history over police misconduct reached $45 million in the Randy Cox case. A $45 million settlement has been reached in the civil police brutality case against Randy Cox. Wait, sorry, not against. Police brutality case involving Randy Cox, a black man now paralyzed from the chest down following an arrest by police officers in New Haven, Connecticut, nearly a year ago. The case represents the largest settlement involving police misconduct in U.S. history and comes 2 years after the $27 million settlement involving the murder of George Floyd. And it sounds like what happened to this man, Randy Cox, is similar to what happened to Freddie Gray in Baltimore, where I now am. But with Freddie Gray, he died. But it's, it's what the police in their euphemistic way call a rough ride. Basically, they handcuff the guy, they throw him in the back of a metal van, and then they slam on the brakes everywhere they're going so that this person is flying into the sides and the back and the front of this van, and sometimes ends up paralyzed, sometimes dead. In the case of Freddie Gray, it was dead. In the case of Randy Cox, it is paralyzed from the waist down. This case was won by civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who said, and this is what I think is part of the key, is in this woefully corrupt, disgusting police brutality system we have here. He says, my endeavor has been very consistent. When we set the record with George Floyd with 27 million, I was very clear that what we're trying to do is make it financially unsustainable for the police to continue to violate our constitutional rights and brutalize us unnecessarily and unjustifiably. Basically, they're using lawfare, which is usually the tactic of the rich. They're using lawfare against police departments in the U.S. The term lawfare comes from warfare, but without firing guns, you're firing legal briefs. And it is usually used by the disgusting tops of our systems. The CEOs and the corporations use it to try and crush much smaller people who can't afford to fight that kind of lawfare battle. But in this case, you have attorneys and citizens using lawfare, using the courts to go after our police systems, which are some of the worst in the fucking world. I mean, these are the most brutal policing systems. We have the largest prison state in the world, and we do not have the largest population in the world. We are 4 to 5%, I think 4% of the world's population, and we have 25% or more of the world's prisoners. We are a disgusting police state. We are a police state, and yet we call ourselves the land of the free? The land of the what? How can you have the most prisoners in the world and be the land of the free? It is so ironic. It is so dystopian. And this is one of the rare moments of citizens fighting back and winning against this police system. And in case I need to remind everyone, Joe Biden is one of the worst perpetrators in terms of building up this prison state, building up this brutal policing system that originated from slave patrols. In case you wanted to know, the history of U.S. policing started with slave patrols and slowly grew in to this system we have now of heavily armed men and women, mainly men, standing on each corner, ready to harass anyone who doesn't fit into the status quo, who doesn't fit into the way the ruling elite want things to work. And to give you one example of how Biden, now he's been doing it his whole career, so this is a more recent example, but his whole career he's been putting forward, sometimes crafting, supporting, pushing bills to make police stronger, bigger, better funded, and succeeding most of the time. He also proudly said that he essentially wrote the Patriot Act. But this is a more recent example. President Biden's signature. So this is while he's president. This is, I mean, most of the stuff you can point to, the crime bill and everything that Joe Biden wrote, the Clinton crime bill that was a big Joe Biden thing that doubled our prison population, mainly black and brown communities, but anybody who isn't in that top 5% echelon. But this is done. This next part was done while he was president. President Biden's signature American Rescue Plan Act, which gave local governments $350 billion to recover from COVID-19. But as this study shows from the Marshall Project, they spent most of it on police and courts and prisons. And Joe Biden supported that usage of the money. He told them, well, you can get that money for more police funding from the COVID funds. After signing the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan Act last spring, President Joe Biden touted what the economic stimulus bill would deliver: food assistance to millions of those in need, who wouldn't be in need if we weren't in capitalism; lower healthcare premiums for millions of Americans who wouldn't be struggling if we didn't have capitalism, or even if we just had healthcare, even if we just had a slightly more sane, slightly more caring version of this parasitic, vampiric economic system. Those people would not be struggling for healthcare. And it would include $350 billion for state and local governments to spend on COVID-19 recovery. Economists say it was the largest infusion of federal funding in local governments in 40 years. Okay, so when you send that much money to local governments, what do they end up using it for? Who's this quote from? Oh, this is okay. So this quote is from Joe Biden. He said during his State of the Union, the American Rescue Plan provided $350 billion cities, states, counties that can use to hire more police, invest in more proven strategies like community violence interruption. Yeah, that means police. Trusted messengers. He said, we should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. No, we only have the largest, most brutal policing system, killing more people than anywhere in the world. But yeah, they need more money. They just can't hang on to money. If you could just really, because I've often said, when someone's killing too many people, try giving them a few bucks. Just give them some money. If one of these mass shooters had just had a few more dollars, then they wouldn't be brutal at all. He said, we should all agree the answer is to not defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them. Fund them. It's tough to say whether he was doing that because his brain was skipping like a record. It's to fund them. Fund them. Fund them, fund them. And then someone behind him, an aide or something, smacks him on the back. Fund them, to the tune of billions of dollars, because when you're that senile, sometimes things just start skipping around. You gotta skip the needle. You gotta jump the needle, so you slam him on the back. Try it with Grandpa next time you get a chance. Anyway, it's tough to know whether he was doing it because of that or because he wanted to reiterate that we should fund the police more. He said, fund them with the resources and training. I do think it's probably the needle skipping, because he then repeats the next part as well. It's not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them with resources and training. They need to protect our communities. I think, in all honesty, I'm not even kidding here. What it is Joe Biden is losing his memory. He's going senile. He's becoming demented. And the past tense of dementia, he's becoming demented. And so what he does to kill time, to give him a moment to try and figure out where the fuck in the sentence he is, and I have my ways as well, such as going, but that's a little bit different than a guy who keeps repeating the same words over and over and over again so that he can have time to figure out whether a verb comes next or a noun. That's what he's doing. Anyway, In case you didn't get it from his quote, he wants to fund the police. So then the article continues, that's the idea. Sorry, that's indeed what thousands of state and local governments did with the federal COVID-19 relief funds they received. While the Treasury Department's lax reporting requirements, well, I'll get to that part in a second. But so these states and municipalities and cities, they took this trillions of dollars, hundreds of billions at least, and they used the majority of it to just pay the guys with guns, hire more guys with guns, more steroidal freaks with guns to go out into the cities and make sure no one's getting uppity. Make sure there is no risk to the ruling power structure. And so that's really where a lot of the money went. But so it then says that it's tough to actually figure out the exact number, the exact amount that has gone to police because a lot of the reporting is kind of vague. They did a review of the latest data, shows that billions of dollars flowed into the criminal justice system by the first quarter of 2022, from covering payroll to purchasing new equipment. So far, governments have allocated $100 billion of the $350 billion. In many cases, the money flows to programs and institutions not with the greatest need during a public health crisis and economic upheaval, but those with the most existing political and budgetary power: police, corrections, and courts. And then it shows some of the numbers. But they talk about how challenging it is to even figure out that all this money is going to police and prisons because some of it is so vague. They say it could say that the expenditures are for government services expenses, as in Laredo, Texas, where they sent $22 million to government service expenses. Well, what did that actually mean? It means courts, prisons, and police. Or they can be as broad as salaries and burden for the provision of core government services, which includes personnel costs for all departments. So they just flood the police with money to continue this totalitarian system we have, inverted totalitarianism, to continue a system where people cannot fight back, where they cannot demand more, where those who are struggling are stuck in that situation and often end up resorting to bad choices because of the situation they're stuck in. Well, the way to make sure that the richest of the rich can maintain their lifestyle and not fear that the people might stand up, might get angry enough to fight back, is to have just as many people with guns as possible. I mean, the U.S. police system is one of the largest armies in the world. And yet we get to act like it's not, right? We act like other countries are repressive. Other countries are authoritarian. Other countries hold their citizens down. We're the free country, right? So, yes. Anyway, all of that is to say this stuff is way too funded, way too heavily armed. The number of police killings, the number one in the world for police killings. And as I've mentioned before, although it is like 1,200 a year, people in America killed by police, that's the official number. The Lancet Medical Journal did a more in-depth research of American policing and found that it's really double that, because half of all killings by police are not written down as killings by police. They're written down as cardiac arrest, excessive electricity to the forehead that might have come from a police taser. But, you know, they lacked oxygen. And it doesn't mention that there was a steroidal police barbarian wrapped around their neck. They couldn't find enough oxygen in the surrounding area. So it's 1,200 is, roughly the number per year. It's actually more like 2,400 people killed by police every year. So there you go. At least citizens are fighting back in the form of lawfare, in the form of using law to try and hold this system accountable. I want to move now to another settlement, another kind of good news settlement, but let's get into what it actually means. In the JP Morgan Chase has just paid out hundreds of millions of dollars in their Epstein settlement. So that story and more will be at rumble.com/Lee Camp. That's rumble.com/Lee Camp. Join me over there for free. You can watch and comment for free over there, rumble.com/Lee Camp. But you can also keep watching at leecamp.net, my locals page, because anybody who's there, your live stream will continue as well. Quick note, I hope everybody joins up at leecamp.net. The minimum is $6 a month, which is 38 cents an episode.